we look forward to getting in the lab and doing. What do people do in a meme lab? Does it involve Bunsen burners, or what do you guys do? Is that a petri dish where we like let memes rot and then watch the sort of decay?
Exactly. It's an experimental apparatus to see how culture disseminates computationally. You know.
Are you ever planning to like it seems like you could probably like insert a meme into a human body and just sort of let it move through you like Fantastic Voyage.
Yeah, so we're injecting the meme straight to our veins.
Exactly.
The only way.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Mitch, for giving the rundown on the lab.
A real answer.
And I'd like to take this opportunity again to encourage people who are here to submit. I just put in the chat our email. Submit to our journal content, Bard Memetics Research Journal, where we will accept essays, submissions, OC, and more unconventional forms of research about memes and the way memes as a form are disseminated. With that,
I'll workshop any of your ideas. Now might be the time.
Yeah, now would be a great time if you have any thoughts to let them out. But without further ado, and this is, please, by all means, everybody send your questions through the chat or just unmute yourselves and ask a question if you'd like. This is a totally open Q&A. But just to get started, I wanted to ask you, Giorgio and Arthur, were you fans of Pepe before its appropriation of the alt-right? Do you guys like memes?
Well, I mean, I was a fan of Pepe from the comic book. So that's pre-meme and then pre-hate symbol. And so whenever I would see Pepe on the internet or, you know, when he popped up in the mainstream news in 2015, I was baffled. But then there was also a part of me that was like, do I understand the story in a way other people don't because I was a fan of the comic book from back in the day? I'm not sure. Giorgio, I think, spends more time in the memosphere than I do. He's a reformed Redditor and is a man who spends a lot of time on Twitter. Yes. So he's more of a memer than I am.
I don't know that I was ever a full-fledged memer, but I was certainly very aware of Pepe as a meme. But then when Arthur told me that he was beginning to work on this project, I was very embarrassed that I didn't really know anything about the backstory of Pepe.
That's because I made him feel embarrassed, though.
Yes.
I chastised him.
Constant shaming. But
yeah.
Yeah, in part, really, the last 3 years has really been a penitence of me making it up to Matt for not knowing about any of this. My guilt is strong.
It's true. This movie was made out of guilt and shame.
Yeah. Well, and somewhat on that note, I was thinking about, so we were putting posters up all over the school, and it struck me and fellow meme labber Alexi while we were doing it that, oh no, we're putting up Pepe's face all over the campus. Yep. So yeah, for you guys, how has it been trying to sell this movie? And you're like, no, wait, but it's not just what, yeah, how has that been?
Well, before we answer that, I want to know so when you put up Pepe, was there anyone that was like, why is there must be an alt-right student or something that is hanging up Pepe around? Like what?
I was curious. I got the message of the flyer and I saw Pepe and Feels Good Man and I was like, this can't be good.
There we go.
Because
are you also a Netflix executive?
No.
Seems like you and they might have the same sort of opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was kind of my thinking, just because I really can't take it away in some ways, which I was gonna ask, like, do you think it could ever be separated? But even though Nick sent it to me, I saw it and I was like, this might go real bad.
Did you have like a visceral feeling when you saw it? It was like, oh no, this thing.
Yeah, I did. I totally did. Like the moment I saw it, I was like, obviously, because I didn't know it was about Pepe. I thought that was just like the meme that was being used as like the symbol. Right. And typically if I do, whenever I see Pepe meme, I'll be like, ha, oh wait. And that same thing happened here where, you know,
you don't know.
It really triggers some sort of worrisome energy in me.
it's too bad that there's not an ability to like click on like a movie poster and then see that that person's profile who made the movie wasn't an alt-right troll. You know,
that really doesn't
like how you're.
But it doesn't really matter, honestly. Like in the times, in general, yes, we were worried about it, and there was even very early discussions when we were going to release the film whether Pepe would even be a part of the marketing, like, and the poster. Like, should we put his face on there? And ultimately, I think, you know, you just lean on the idea that, you know, he's the most he's the most recognizable meme on the planet, so you just got to lean into it. But honestly, the only real kind of visceral response we would ever get, at least in the early days, early meaning like 2 months ago when it came out, was with like kind of older hashtag resist women who when we were running ads, especially, they would be like not aware of why they were getting served this ad. It was like this cognitive dissonance, like, why do I keep seeing this Nazi frog? And then you'd be like, oh, well, actually, like I've flagged this as hate symbol like 10 times and it still keeps popping up. And I'm like, well, and I comment saying, well, actually, it's like a Sundance award-winning film and a New York Times critics pick. And there was just like no amount of associating the project with like safe liberal causes that would get them to just break out of the impulse to say like bat symbol, Nazi.
Yeah.
And you're starting to understand maybe the intelligence behind maybe some streamers decisions.
Well, and I think even people that might want to give the film the benefit of the doubt or understand Pepe and all of its crazy context, I think still at this point have such like sort of PTSD from that like moment and the character when they see it. There's just this like visceral like, ugh, this again kind of, you know. And that was something that even we encountered, like one of the programmers at Sundance who turned out to like she ended up introducing the film in one of the screenings and was like hung out and was great. But her initial reaction to the film was maybe similar to yours, Liam, where you know, she had a docket of films and she saw the green frog on her docket and was like, oh man, the movie about the Nazi frog. And she was initially like, I thought I was going to hate it, but then I watched the movie and I ended up really loving it. And I think that has been sort of like a reoccurring thing with the film. It's just getting people to like sit down and take the film sort of on its own merits without maybe some of the baggage. But I don't know. I think that's also what makes the film potent and interesting. And but yeah, it wasn't an easy sell and continues to be kind of a unique project to present to people. You know, we happened to be in Washington, D.C. during the March for Our Lives rally, and we were filming an interview there, but we decided to just kind of like go and maybe do a couple man on the street interviews that didn't end up making the film at all. And it was interesting. We had two different experiences there. One experience was, and we were asking kids about memes and social media and also Pepe. And so, you know, most of the kids, and we were talking to a very diverse, relatively like lefty leaning audience of like teenagers, and almost none of them associated Pepe with being a hate symbol. If anything, a lot of them probably weren't able to vote in 2016, and they were just like, oh, that's a funny meme, or that's like a meme my mom uses, like Pepe already seen maybe played out. But then there was like another sort of woman who was like leading she was like probably a teacher, and she brought a group of kids, and I was talking to her, and as soon as I said the word Pepe, she started to walk away from me, assuming that I was probably like some sort of like Milo-y kind of like troll person that was like looking to basically like exploit her goodwill or be shitty. And so, yeah, it's been interesting to observe in all different kinds of folks.
But he also, in that group of people, there was also that older sister who was maybe like 18, and we were interviewing her little brother who was maybe like 13, and he really just didn't know anything about Pepe's dark side. He just liked it as a meme.
Yeah, he just thought it was funny.
She stopped the interview because she was basically like, I don't want my brother to become a meme. Like, she was petrified of the possibility that he might be included in this film and then himself become a meme. I guess in the spirit of like that era of Reddit when, you know, you have like the scumbag Steves and all that kind of shit. Like, but so just being hyper aware of how how you represent yourself, and I don't know, we were aware of like all these kinds of things, to the extent that even in the film, we were in the animations, we were like very careful about what how we were rendering the story inside our own animations and how those could be potentially memed. But at the end of the day, you can't really stop any of the shit. So I don't know.
You can, well, I mean, I think we did feel like we could stop some of the potential repurposing of Pepe from the film. Like in the animation, you never see like us using like a smug Pepe or us using like a Trump Pepe. We wanted very specifically to keep the animation that is either kind of basically directly sort of taken from Matt's comics or inspired by Matt's comics to have its own particular stage presence and not feel like it was part of the sort of, you know, flood of memes that was happening in the part of the movie that was like where the internet was. There was sort of 3 different distinct areas in the movie. There was like the sort of documentary footage, there was Matt's comic animations, and then the world of the internet, which was motion graphics. And so that was something we talked a lot about. But I think at that point, actually, the fact that maybe I wasn't, and some of the other filmmakers on it weren't as keyed into kind of like internet culture as maybe you would assume from the film. So maybe we didn't have all that baggage. Maybe it was something that helped us kind of in the end.
Yeah, so I had a question kind of regarding sort of like finding the people to be interviewed and stuff, because I mean, first of all, I don't know how you even started with like a topic this big, but I was curious like how you met the guy who considered himself like a NEET, because he was like very like it seemed like he had kind of low self-esteem, but he was like very like open about it and very like confident in showing you like around his room, and just kind of like you kind of like used videos of his. Yeah, truly the breakout star for sure. And I don't know, I guess I just wonder like how you found that guy, and like, because I feel like most people wouldn't, you know, want to show that side of their life, and like how do you feel like showing someone like that, I guess? Well,
strangely enough, when Giorgio and I rolled into town to film that section, and it was just the 2 of us, and we knew we had to be like have a pretty like low profile, you know, we couldn't show up there with like a big lighting rig and a cameraman and all this sort of stuff. And that he actually cleaned his room. So that's a slightly sanitized presentation of his space. There was a room next to the room where like the hot water heater was, and that room was filled with dirty dishes and an overflowing cat litter box. And so that was gross.
But Arthur, you came across him. Well, he's actually kind of a meme on 4chan himself.
Yeah. So there's a board on 4chan called, and I don't know, is anyone here? Did anyone here spend time on 4chan, like maybe in their teen years or still?
I'm on 4chan right now.
Oh, there we go. Mitch, make your face known. Why are you anonymous?
Anonymous. Don't be a monogamous.
Don't be a monogamous. So Anon, Mitch, and then everybody else. So there's a board called R9K, which is short for Robot 9000. And the board has gone through a few different kind of, 4chan has had a relatively long life, and the board has gone through a few different kind of like group switchovers. But it's a board that people often self-identify as being autistic on. It's also a board that a lot of kind of like the incel, even though they would hate me saying that, the incel culture came out of, or was popularized a little bit. It's also the board that like Wojak kind of mostly came out of. And so Mills, his picture pops up on R9K a lot, and he's become a meme within 4chan as sort of the face of the prototypical, as there's sort of a cast of different 4chaners or ex-4chaners that are like the prototypical face of 4chan. And he was one of those guys. And so he had a YouTube archive, and I was doing just, the research for this film involved just like spending hours and hours on the internet, spending hours and hours on 4chan. And I'd reached out to a couple of people that had initially written messages to Matt Fury and basically trolled him. And that was my first take at trying to find someone to talk to from this world. And we felt like it was also very important to have someone from the message boards in the film, because we wanted to show how Pepe emotionally resonated with people. So people understood Matt's emotional connection to Pepe, but they needed to understand the emotional connection of Pepe to the message board users. And that was that emotional connection was much more interesting to us than like the provocateurs of the movement, and the way that those provocateurs sought to use Pepe basically as propaganda to lure people like Mills, who are very like angry and entitled and disenfranchised, into their movement. And so we really thought a voice like Mills was important in the film. But there was basically an archive of his YouTube videos that someone else had archived, and he did for about a year. He was making these diaries, and one of these diary entries was simply named with like the date that it was uploaded, and I just happened to click on it. It had like maybe 20 views or something, and it's the video that's in the film where Mills is looking at his phone and he's saying like, "What does Pepe mean to me?" And I remember the moment very clearly. I was like, I was researching the film. I was up late at night. My girlfriend was asleep in the other room. The house was dark, and I felt like Mills was talking to me. It was like a dark room, and his face was like the scale of his face. I was watching on my laptop, and I felt like he was talking to me, and I just had a feeling, oh, he's going to be in the film. And so I reached out to him.
Yeah, and to that end, I mean, I think, yeah, there's a weird thing with 4chan where, like, of course, most people are anonymous, but it also operates very similarly to Instagram, in that there's still a desire to there's still a reward system that's very similar to Instagram. It's just the inputs are much different. It's like, instead of posting pictures of you on a yacht to try to like represent your fake like luxury self, your lavish self, to create FOMO and all your followers, you post the most depraved, awful shit possible to like instigate a response from the audience. So there's kind of built into it a similar interest in being recognized in some way or another. The name might be anonymous, but like you want to post like dank content that gets upvoted a lot. And so then finding someone who's like interested in taking that to the next level, I think for Eggman, that's what he goes by, but his name is Mills. He like was trying to build a career that a lot of people like him are trying to do, is like be Twitch stars and just kind of sit at home all day and try to eke out a living just making bad commentary and like awful misogynistic racist commentary for people who wants to hear that. We
caught him in a moment where he was trying to
get out of it.
I'm not sure he's still doing it, but he was trying to maybe like become like a low grade live streamer, which is, and you see like a representation of his live stream content obviously in the film as well.
But he would be the first person to tell you that like he understands that the culture of 4chan is really toxic. He has a love-hate relationship with it, and that he's like always in this mode of trying to get out of it. And it's almost like the way an alcoholic might talk about kind of quitting drinking, right? It has a very similar spiraling effect. So I mean, he was really, honestly, kind of gracious in allowing us into his world and being as unvarnished as possible. But at the same respect, it was always very hard to figure out when he was being authentic, which was impossibly annoying because, he would walk upstairs to the upstairs life. His parents, really sweet people. His brother is like a nice young chap who's also trying to be a kind of YouTube hunting star. And he's like a completely different person above ground, and then he descends down into his lair and just like reverts back to this awful shit. It's like a very real reality for a lot of people, and they can't seem to get out of it because for whatever reason they think that the world owes them something, and they're like uniquely that their struggles are somehow unique to them and not to like humanity in general, and that they should have to take this out on everyone else. But it was important for us to like understand that system because it's certainly not going away, and we have to figure out how to like crack that code, because it's not good for the rest of us and for them.
I guess we have another question here from Nico. Are you aware of the other recent film about internet subculture, That Feeling When No Girlfriend by Alex Lee Moyer? The film takes a very different approach to similarly touching subject matter. Any thoughts on the differences in your filmmaking? We're aware of that film. I kind of purposely haven't watched it just because there's this funny moment where it was like, oh, Pepe is premiering at Sundance and Wojak is premiering at South by Southwest. I mean, I think we kind of sought to tell a larger contextual story about what was going on in America. And my perception of Alex's movie is that she was looking to kind of just tell a story about 4 or 5 different kind of guys from this kind of like beta masculine subculture on the internet. You know, so I think we were kind of really hoping to perhaps make a little bit of a different statement, and she was looking to make sort of a more of a verite film. But like I said, I've not really spent much time with that film.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really critical difference really in the approach. Like, I think she was kind of looking at it from a sympathetic lens, almost trying to ingratiate herself with the community. You know, and that's a choice. I'm not sure, or I'm pretty sure, I'm positive that's not the position we wanted our film to be in. We were more interested in understanding, like I said earlier, like the systems at play. Like, how is it that someone can find themselves in their basement for 12 hours, 18 hours a day, like just mainlining the worst content possible and just irony poisoning themselves to death.
Yeah, we're not billing ourselves as based filmmakers or.
Yeah, and it wasn't to make a value judgment about that lifestyle. It's to really understand how all these things are connected, for the purposes of like ameliorating the problem, rather than just kind of like hanging out with these people and being like, oh, aren't these people sad and weird? And we should like. It had a very like, there was this horrendous New York Times op-ed from Ross Douthat a couple of years ago, where he like proposed the idea of getting all these incels prostitutes, and that somehow that should like cure the problem.
This was in the New York Times?
Yeah, well, it's Ross Douthat, who's
I guess I'd prefer my tax money to go to that than drone strikes, but wow.
Exactly. But he's quite famously like a very prudish Catholic boy. So it was especially.
Maybe we need to get him a prostitute.
Exactly. But it was just that's kind of how I look at that film in some way. It's like, yeah, we're not talking about like the problems in the right way here. Like, that's the issue is not that we should like sympathize for these people and like give them prostitutes to cure their weird sexual fantasies.
Is that the third act of That Feeling When No Girlfriend? She just gets them all prostitutes.
Ross the boss, he's definitely lurking on R9K 100%. Anyway, shout out to Ross.
I just want to jump in here. Hold on a second. I've seen That Feel When No GF, and it's definitely, your approach is definitely a lot more holistic. And I just want to talk about, because you both kind of work with, like, she with Wojak and you with Pepe, but we're seeing this general like kind of memification of culture, where like it's not necessarily about creating an artwork like in whole, but you're specifically trying to like meme something. You're specifically trying to create something that'll become like a meme for people to inhabit, like to inject their relatability into. And I was just wondering if you could maybe talk about that, like as creators working in this industry, like if you've seen that kind of trend, or if that's something that kind of affects, you know, kind of the creative direction of work lately.
Well, you know, we had Matt Fury as kind of like the central story within our film, and so that obviously seeks to like humanize Pepe, because he and Pepe are so intertwined. You know, we were, you know, I think we definitely, our sort of artistic device when we were creating the narrative within the film was to really like, I mean, Pepe is a very obvious and very flexible emotional symbol, you know, feels good man, feels bad man, feels sad man, feels smug man, etc. And so we really kind of chose to tell you know, an emotional story using Pepe as sort of like the organizational lens for the film. You know, we didn't, you know, there was an edit in which we had like maybe a 10 or 15 minute sort of like section on memetics both in the universal Darwinist sense from the 1970s, and then also maybe thinking a little bit more about the virality of now. But you know, we kind of kept coming back to this notion of the thin green line, which was something that our editor Aaron came up with, and it was just like this like little, like, I mean, it was a meme within our filmmaking. You know, it was just a little kind of like a device that we would use to basically keep us on track so that the film wouldn't just kind of like spiral out of control and would no longer be like maybe relatable. So, you know, I don't know if kind of this larger discussion of like memes affected our filmmaking per se, but I am curious. I think Feels Good Man is sort of the beginning of probably a number of other films that are maybe about this kind of subject matter, and I'm curious to see kind of where that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably more directly influential to how people are coalescing political movements, right? Like it's becoming, like memes are really powerful propaganda tools because, like you said, people inject their own meanings into these ideas, and if you're sitting in front of a computer screen for hours on end, having your own unique experience of intaking information and experience and like shame and humiliation and laughter and sadness, and you're associating these emotions with like certain images, they become like really powerful emotional triggers, both in the kind of pejorative way that like trolls online shame you for being like triggered, but also triggering for them. Like it makes them very prideful to share certain memes. And like for the Republican Party during the Trump era, I think they found a kind of powerful force in which they could eschew all of the pesky needs to kind of pretend to care about politics and pretend to care about things like balancing budgets and all this bullshit that they've been spreading for decades, and just go purely to the heart of what they've always been trying to drive at, which is like anger and like to coalesce an otherwise incoherent political movement around no intellectual basis. You have to have something to anchor it around. And so like memes and iconography become really useful ways to coalesce those emotions around and make them kind of useful. And so Pepe kind of outlived its use, but now, you know, 4chan is arguably kind of the central meme figure of that political movement. So yeah, I don't know. It's memes are they're dangerous and exciting and funny for all the same reasons, and that like they can mean 1,000 different things. The same image can mean like 1,000 different things to 1,000 different people, but they all feel equally true. You know what I mean? And so it's really hard to like build a democracy around that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that response. That was great. And it's definitely, when you see people like making these beautiful like Soviet realist Pepe memes that they spend hours on in Illustrator, and they get, you know, it must be such a dopamine rush to get like 5,000 upvotes on the Donald.win or whatever, but it's just like
or imagine him then retweeting it. Yeah.
Even his son definitely reads it, which is crazy. Like it's crazy to think that there's political figures like absorbing these like memes and kind of propagating them up the chain of command. It's nuts.
No, that was
Donald Jr. is he's basically become a Frankenstein monster of memes at this point. Like he's just I don't think he's like smart enough to kind of like actually have like a normal conversation, or so he's just now just like a walking, talking meme regurgitation sort of automaton.
Hello. Oh wait, Maria, do you want to go?
Hello.
Hello. Emmanuel.
How very formal.
Yeah. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to ask a quick.
Emmanuel.
Yes. I just wanted to ask a quick question. First of all, I just want to say hello, Ed Halter. I just want to say, Giorgio, I love your background. It's hilarious, especially having been in quarantine for like almost a year. That's a hilarious image to have behind you. I just wanted to preface by saying that it had to be acknowledged. I also wanted to like go back to something that you guys mentioned earlier, kind of just like colloquially, but just like I'm kind of fascinated with this. You guys said that there was like an almost guilt of like trying to help Matt through like this like really like tough thing that happened to like his baby. And what I kind of found with this movie is that it kind of almost like created like I was fascinated of this creation of like a canon with like Pepe and the whole story and everything that came with it, like all of the aspects. And like,
you mean like an artistic canon or a canon that's firing JPEGs at you? What do you mean by canon?
The first canon, the canon of like the lore of Pepe, because like with a lot of internet memes, it's so easy to just like the whole point of like internet memes is just like they're taken out of context. Totally. And it's so easy to take out of context, and that's like what happened to like Matt's like comic from the very beginning. Like it was just like something taken out of context, and then like it spiraled out of control where like the context is almost like on like so detached from like how everybody like deals with it. So I want to know if there was like some sort of like responsibility of like a greater cause to like kind of rectify and like create like the true definitive story on Pepe. And I feel like you guys succeeded like amazingly well with creating like a beautiful, wonderfully made film. So I just wanted to know if there was like some sort of responsibility that you felt when creating this film, because that's something that was just so apparent to me while watching the film.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. That was absolutely the motivation, was to kind of like re-engineer a context so that people had to like confront the truth of his gestation and like where he came from and Matt's emotions behind it. I think, you know, Matt's just a solitary indie comic artist. No, there's no big corporation pushing Pepe's brand. And in some sense, it's actually because of that kind of incredibly extraordinary that Matt's drawing was able to become so popular around the world. I mean, it's arguably maybe like in the top 10 most recognizable cartoon characters in the world at this point, all through really no effort of his own, just in the strength of the comic itself and the weirdness of the internet and how it works. But in the same respect, in the vacuum of that space, in the vacuum of having like millions of dollars pumped in to churn out a cartoon brand, the internet was able to make up its own narrative and multitude of narratives for Pepe. And so the film in one specific sense, certainly animations were meant to basically create canon. Exactly. And that's the way we've talked about it, really. So that you have to, so when you encounter these memes in the future, you know exactly what they are. They're derivations. It's like the Calvin peeing on the Ford logo type thing, you know, like, you know, that's not Bill Watterson's Calvin, but also like, where the fuck did that come from?
But we always kind of thought there was maybe like a sneaky kind of emotional possibility within the film. And I know I keep using the word emotion, but I mean, ultimately cinema is you know, an art form that you know, engenders emotion in people. But you know, so much of the stuff that kind of happens online or in social media, we sort of do think about as either happening within a vacuum or happening from like sort of a very like self-centered impulse. And so we've kind of always thought that if maybe you're someone that has used Pepe in any sort of context, maybe if you're someone that is like sort of always envisioned it as just kind of this like thing that has no sort of context, doesn't really mean anything to you or anyone else, then all of a sudden the butterfly effect of that is, oh, actually these sort of things that seemingly might be done in a vacuum actually do affect a real person. That person is Matt. And, you know, ultimately we wanted to make a film that didn't sort of like take the transhumanism of the internet as sort of like, you know, contextual fact. We wanted this film to be like a living, breathing kind of experience for people, that even at the end of the film, we wanted to kind of embrace a certain sense of poetry that didn't have this like dystopian intent that a lot of like films about social media or the dark web, or science fiction films even might have. We wanted this film to not be like a transhuman film, even though it is about this JPEG and this moment where all these different people who are very far apart from each other physically are creating these coalitions online in a space that really doesn't have any sense of community the way that humans have evolved to have community thus far. So yes, but I don't think it was guilt. I mean, we were joking earlier about guilt and shame, and while I probably carry a lot of personal guilt, I don't think we had necessarily a sense of guilt on Matt's behalf or ourselves. But we did think that Matt's story was relatable. He was an interesting protagonist that people could identify with in a variety of ways, or maybe even get like upset with at various points. So.
Hey, I have a question.
Sure.
Oh, wait, hold on. I have to take the tape off my Hey, what's up? Hey, Arthur.
You can close Pornhub in the other window too.
Never. I will never close Pornhub.
All right.
That's a permanent tab. Permanent tab. Okay. Hey, Arthur, you remember me? I met you like 20 years ago.
Yeah, I do remember you through Jim Finn, right?
Yeah. The movie is great. This documentary is great. And one thing I love about it is that it instantly becomes a work of history. Like I forgot. I mean, this happened like yesterday, and I've watched it like as if it was like something that happened 100 years ago that I totally didn't know about. So I love it as a work of instant history, which the internet needs. It needs fast history. You can't wait 10 years, right? My question though is a more bigger one. I mean, this made me, I thought about this with TFW No GF, which I saw also, is that, I don't know, this is a persistent question, and I know there's a lot of ways to answer this. So it's more that I'm just curious what you guys think. And that is, one thing I think about with memes all the time is that they're so universally loved by all, like at this point, by all ages, by all kinds of people, whatever. But it seems like in these movies that want to get at them at memes, the closer you get at the source, it just gets very male. It gets very male and very not diverse, right? So I'm just curious, looking back, and I don't know why. I know people have lots of explanations for this, but what do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't have a concise answer to that question. No, and it's just side note. It's great to have emailed with Ben about this and run into you again over Zoom many years later. It's such a small world. Obviously 4chan is an extremely male place, and it started out as an extremely male place in part because it was based on a Japanese message board that came out of a fan culture that is almost exclusively male. And in Japan, there was actually sort of a version of neets that came out of Japan, the otaku culture. And that was just like men that didn't necessarily want to compete within the very like formal hierarchy of like Japanese society. And they wanted to purposely retreat into the fantasy world of anime and manga and all sorts of video games, all sorts of different things. And so 4chan in its initial iteration was very masculine too. I think that there's a certain kind of like guy that their social development is such that their teenage years are spent kind of almost in hiding, in retreat. And I think that, now those retreats are more seductive. Video games are video games can kind of pull you in an entire universe where your entire social community is based around the people in the chat. So I do think for whatever reason, message boards are particularly addictive to young men, but then there's also this kind of like a moment where a lot of people are on these boards where they're really kind of looking for ways to like self-actualize. There may be guys in their mid teens, and that's why you also see like so much kind of like libertarian kind of discussions that are happening on these boards and reactionary thinking, because I think it's like that moment in a lot of like young guys' life where those kind of that kind of politics really resonates with you, because you're trying to figure out like a way to really separate yourself and to create power within your own individual kind of like perception of yourself. And so You know, 4chan is that said though, if you spend enough time on 4chan, you realize that within the sort of within the sort of like you know, huge sort of like awning of masculinity, there's a lot going on in 4chan. You know, 4chan is not just all kind of like teenage fascists. There's like gay kids on 4chan who run, you know, who run the fit board. The trans kids run the gay board. Like there's this kind of like group of individuals that find themselves there that feel as though they've been bullied and sort of downtrodden. And they maybe want to hide from the rest of the culture, and this is their safe space. And so, and there's also a lot of porn on it, and you know, young men enjoy pornography, and it's a kind of okay place to go to for that. And it existed before all of the other like tube sites and stuff like that. So it's just another form of emotional retreat during a confusing time in your life. But you know, you do see, you know, I certainly have talked to a lot of people who study extremism through the course of making this film, and most extremism does start with this sort of early misogyny, this early sense of rejection and then hatred for women. And you see that play out in 4chan in so many different kind of ways. And then that anger kind of then sort of like exponentially goes in kind of different directions. And so
that's sort of like the first visceral feeling that like a young man might experience, is just the feeling of female rejection. And then there's this space where other people share that experience, and then like and then you're off to the races. You know, it's like all these people just kind of revving each other up, right? And it becomes like a really dangerous echo chamber for that reason. But yeah, for sure, like time and time again, the most overarching point that most people, experts in the topic of radicalization, always talked about was that like misogyny was like the way in every single time.
Yeah, and we had a hard time getting women to appear in the film.
Yeah,
I will say that. We asked a lot of writers, academics, researchers on trolling to be in the film who are women, and Alex Krotowski was the only one that agreed to be in the film.
And then a bunch of the ones that rejected we're all, you know, politely rejected, but they all ended up being in The Social Dilemma.
Exactly. So.
Oops.
Giorgio, I know that you worked on my friend Dahmer. So what is it about violent white males?
Yes, it's a theme. I guess it's starting to build.
No, but I'm generally curious. What do you think deserves to be so studied about this specific group?
Well, I wish there was more deliberate through line in those decisions. They honestly, in filmmaking, you often you put out a lot of feelers, and you kind of like leave it up to the film gods to decide which projects actually come to fruition. It just so happened that I guess these are the projects that so maybe it's really the zeitgeist that chose this path. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was a really interesting alternative version of My Friend Dahmer, I think, that could have been made, that's really about a critique about the kind of unwinding of American exceptionalism, and like a more capitalist critique, and like how society abandoned this guy and looked the other way and assumed someone else would handle the problem, or like assumed that that things would work themselves out, and they didn't, obviously. So there's like a pretty direct correlation there. I would imagine if 4chan existed in the 70s, that Jeffrey Dahmer would be like pretty into it.
For sure. Yeah.
Like
maybe he wouldn't have killed all these people if he just was posting image macros on 4chan.
Exactly. But you know, I think there is a kind of capitalist critique within the Mills's moment, right? He's a guy who thinks like why should I go to college? Or I went to college but dropped out because it was too expensive. And what's the point anyway? Because I'm just going to rack up all this debt to do what? Like, I live in this podunk town and I'm just going to work for $12 an hour anyway. And like the whole system is rigged against me, you know. So this there's a kind of deep nihilism behind both films, and a kind of rejection of organized society, and a belief that these things are uniquely happening to you and only you, and so therefore you have every right to kind of hate the world around you and drag everyone down to your level. But of course, like, that's not true. Everyone's having to deal with these problems, and in many cases have like you know, much bigger hurdles than you to overcome. So I think, like, I don't know, the difference is maybe the part that's scary to me is like when you get a bunch of Jeffrey Dahmers in the same room together, all psyching each other up, right? That was another thing that one of the people we interviewed, who's a psychologist, said, but we decided not to include in the film because, you know, it's not our job to like diagnose people. We didn't want to feel like we were tacitly diagnosing people in the film, but I think it is a truth. And he was basically saying that, you know, in the world of psychiatry and psychology, there's no real clear methods for understanding how to like definitively cure antisocial disorders. They're really hard to solve, but what they know for sure is that what you should never do is put a bunch of antisocial people together in the same room. And like, that's effectively what the internet is doing.
Right. Because they'll learn from each other. They'll radicalize each other. They'll only like sort of create a self-perpetuating super toxic echo chamber.
And now you have Parler. So like, let's just throw in some uneducated.
You can join John Tesh and Ricky Schroeder on Parler.
Yeah. So that's honestly what I'm terrified of.
Yeah, Arthur, I'm equally curious. Did you, like, when doing research for the film, did you find anything in 4chan or like in this white supremacist groups that was just like actually like you were taken aback by?
There were moments certainly that we were spending with Mills where I was actively taken back by something that I would observe or he would say sort of offhandedly. And those were things that couldn't sort of be easily communicated within Feels Good Man. You know, it would just be like we would have a long discussion, and then, you know, because to do both the interviews and to spend time with Mills and Pizza also, you know, we spent a lot of time with them, so you end up getting to kind of know them in a pretty, you know, full way. And yeah, there were definitely times, you know, he performed a rap about how women shouldn't be able to vote that was like angry and vitriolic. He was like red and sweaty by the end of it. And that was a moment that definitely made my heart stop. You know, but then was also totally absurd, completely absurd. So I mean, I have been sort of frustrated to see how immovable some of these ways of thinking are for people. How even someone like Mills, who can have these sort of, like Giorgio was talking about, like we would have like really good conversations with Mills that were, and he would even acknowledge the fact that probably the repetitive conversations he was having, whether it's in the chats or on 4chan, were detrimental to him, but he would still return back to it. And even though he would sort of understand that like the life he was living within his family was very different than how he's presenting themselves on these boards, he couldn't break free of that. And I do find that to be authentically disturbing, how people just can't break free of this stuff. And you see it play out now in society, and perhaps kind of accelerating in pretty, you know, disturbing ways, like Kyle Rittenhouse. And so yeah, that stuff it's been disturbing to sort of observe this 4 years ago, and now see how it's kind of continued to grow and continue to stay a problem. And then obviously, you know, Pepe is a joke that started on 4chan and kind of, you know, it was part of the aesthetics of trolling that then became like part of mainstream politics in 2016. And here we are in 2020, and another 4chan joke, QAnon, all of a sudden now is kind of like also affecting mainstream politics. And so I am disappointed to say that all of this dumb bullshit that you see on 4chan does actually kind of continue to affect society. Just when you sort of think the stupidity of 4chan may have played itself out, it continues to come back and be kind of this incubator for all of this other stuff that we're dealing with.
Cecily has a question. Could you please speak a little bit on the meme wizard, how you discovered him, if he would be my guru, etc. That was, you know, anytime you make a documentary, you're going to make a lot of plans for how you think it's going to work out, and you're going to write a bunch of different, like, documentary filmmaking is mostly writing, actually, writing that will never
It's true.
light of day. And so a lot of what ends up on screen is just total accident, and that was definitely one of them. I happened to got interviewed on a podcast talking about a previous film, and they, you know, the perfunctory closing question is like, what are you working on next? And I just kind of cagily talked about Pepe because we didn't want to be public about it. And then someone who was listening to the podcast happened to hear that and just was like, hey, if you're doing a project about Pepe, you should like really read up on this guy, John Michael Greer. And I shared it with Arthur, and we just started looking at his videos and listening to his podcasts and reading his work. I'm like, oh, this dude absolutely has to be in the film, because we wanted to talk about meme magic. This was late. This is one of the last interviews we filmed, and we knew that we had to talk about meme magic, but every way in that we had conceived of before that seemed either too doctrinaire and boring, and like, therefore wanting to make a really fun movie didn't feel in the spirit of the film to engage that kind of topic. And so, like, as soon as you Google his name, like, just Google his name right now, you'll see, you know, his arch druid photo, and he just combines.
Yeah, he's in the regalia of an arch druid. Yeah,
and he just combines, like, to me, he combined exactly what the spirit of the film was, which was like intense curiosity about a really weird subject, talking about it in a very serious way, but also having the self-awareness to speak humorously about it, because you have to recognize how ridiculous it all is. And so he was just kind of a perfect sport to all of it.
And I think it just kind of like, it's, you know, as a filmmaker, especially when you're sort of making a film that is perhaps seeking to inform people of something, you want to have the audience kind of maybe question your motivations. You want the audience to kind of like maybe connect the dots for themselves at various points. So all of a sudden, like, having him come on and talking about 4chan, I think is a moment where all of a sudden you have to kind of be like, oh, okay, wait a minute. Maybe you can enjoy him for his stage presence and like the fact that we filmed him in this beautiful library and stuff. But ultimately, I think there's kind of a moment where you're like, am I taking him seriously? Why did the filmmakers put him in the film? And we actually think like those kind of questions actually kind of strengthen the audience connection to the movie, and maybe it separates it from like a maybe more, I mean, it's a conventional documentary, but, you know, maybe like a more conventionally, you know, dry sort of seated interview style documentary. So, you know, he was someone though that I, like Giorgio was saying, is, you know, when we first started making the film, you know, you have your best laid plans, and then at a certain point you just have to realize that, you know, filmmaking is, you basically have to hoard all of this stuff, and then you have to throw away the stuff that no longer matters. And so within that, you know, you have to really be open to the sense of possibility within the filmmaking. And so, you know, he was a wonderful gift where during, you know, there's a thing that happens sometimes when you're making a film that's very disheartening, where you start an interview with someone, and after the first question, you immediately realize this interview won't make the film, that nothing this person's going to say is going to surprise you or engage you or be of use, but you have to kind of just go ahead and continue to like do the interview because you've set up the lights and they took the time to do it. And with John though, it just was like, yeah, there was a feeling, you know, you got goosebumps when he talked. It was an interview, you know, we interviewed some people for many hours. John's interview was like maybe a half hour after we set up the lights and stuff. Like, Yeah, it was a really like fun, special thing that it was a great interview to kind of like maybe like have towards the end of the film, because it really put some wind in our sails. But also, I mean, we haven't talked about this. I mean, he talks about meme magic is something that people talk about on 4chan all the time. Part of that is a joke, because they like making connections between things. They like kind of this conspiratorial web of things. So, you know, if Pepe is the de facto god of 4chan, then why can't the de facto god of 4chan be a 3,000-year-old frog god from Egypt, and Pepe is just the reincarnated spirit of that? Like, that's certainly like a fun joke that obviously people were talking about and running with on the message boards. But John talks about magic in a way that's like a little bit more historical when you explore some of his other writing. And he talks about magic as being the politics of the unheard, or like magic has often sort of become popular within communities that are communities that have no agency or no power within the society that they are sort of isolated within. And so that's why you would see like magic happen within slave communities historically and stuff like this, because it's people trying to like assert their will on their situation. And they're doing this through like art and consciousness and communal sort of like mass mind imagination and this kind of stuff. So what he's talking about isn't total hocus pocus. It's something that I think, you know, you can interpret in a variety of ways.
I do have a follow-up question. Sorry, can you hear me? I do have a follow-up question about the like absurdity of like meme magic. You mentioned it started out as a bit of a joke, but the film kind of makes clear, which is a wonderful film, by the way. It's so good. But it really makes clear that it has like real material consequences, and usually like human lives are at stake in the context of the school shooters. I was really curious how it felt doing research for this film. Like, maybe like what stood out to you? Did you have a moment where like, oh God, like this is running deeper than we expected? One moment that made me feel that way was about the trading cards, which is completely insane and so devastating, because these are the people who hold the resources in the world, and they're choosing to invest it in kind of a subculture that, you know, is built on hate for the other and trying to drag everyone down. And so I think that like disparity between, this started out as a kind of a, you know, a joke between boys, but then spiraling into something that is really like devastating people's lives, because these people aren't happy either is the thing. It's like it's a net loss situation. And so I really wanted to know like how you felt. Like, did you feel that way, or am I just like not as aware of this subculture about having trading cards, fast cars, and my God, conferences and pop songs? Like this is like they have their own nation. This is a completely different economy.
Well, certainly there were moments where I think both Giorgio and I were feeling a sense of like dismay or disappointment with some stuff. Like there was a moment, the Alec Manassian shooting and he drove a van into a group of people in Toronto, and he's an incel ex-4chan guy. And we were with Mills when that happened, and watching Mills sort of like go through, he was clearly processing that event in a way that we were not. And that was something that I found to be pretty upsetting. I think in terms of the crypto guys though, I wouldn't actually sort of presume that they have a tremendous amount of power in society. They have the power that like white men have, but I think both of them are actually feeling some of the same sense of confusion that Mills is feeling. And they're trying to figure out a way to kind of like basically enter the middle class. And they're doing it in kind of two different ways. The guy in the car, while he does have very expensive cars and very expensive taste, it's not like, you know, it's not like he is participating in the upper crust of American society. He is on the edges of it, and he is trying to basically manifest this life through like social media and like the way he presents himself. But the reality is he's grasping at straws the way a lot of people of his generation are. And he's clearly throwing his money down the toilet on these JPEGs. I mean, he appeared in the film because I think that he had hoped that someone would see the movie and then buy Homer Pepe because they would figure it was a good investment. So he appeared in the film in the car. That song that he sings, he wrote as an advertisement for the JPEG. And so there was a funny moment where we were hanging out with Peter and Martin at the same time. Martin is Pepe Cash Millionaire, and they had only talked within the message boards. They'd never seen each other's face. They'd never hung out. And I think there was this funny moment where Peter and Martin met for the first time, and they immediately realized they did not have very much in common at all. And if anything, Peter thought that the community of like Pepe traders was much cooler than he had expected. And then he realized like, oh no, I'm a nerd. Shit, fuck. Like, I thought I was a cool guy. I thought I was Tom Cruise in my car with this JPEG, and I am not. And so, you know, like the Pepe Cash Millionaire, when I first talked to him on the phone, he, you know, I assumed he was standing on a yacht, like off the coast of Tahiti, like, you know, drinking a mimosa. He's the Pepe Cash Millionaire. But then when we get there, we realize that's not the truth at all. That's the joke that he is sort of participating within. You know, he bought that boat for $3,000. He bought it with Pepe Cash, but it was about $3,000. It barely works. It's barely seaworthy. He lives there. There's fungus growing in the boat and on him. It was something that, you know, I think I don't know. I think there's also something to be said, though, what you're saying, though, about like sort of the power and the way that we kind of like fantasize about power personally. So, for instance, there's this meme that is within the cryptocurrency universe. And they say when you amass enough cryptocurrency, you will have, you'll be able to like take a Lambo to the moon. And that, of course, is a joke. You'll be able to buy a Lamborghini and fly it to the moon. That's obviously a joke, but it does speak to kind of like a libertarian truth. And that is like, I want to be able to buy my cool stuff and go to a place where no one can bug me. It's the same moment of retreat. It's the same impulse of someone like going into their room, closing the door and firing up 4chan and spending 12 hours on 4chan rather than like, you know, having a group of friends in IRL. And so, so I do think that like, it is indicative of this larger social problem. It's just sort of a different prismatic sort of way of looking at it.
But to Cecily's point, though, I think you are getting at some truth here, which is that they are those in power in the sense that they're like white men and they're subscribing to the kind of like politics of trolling. And they found in Donald Trump a kind of spirit animal, because there's always a wink wink to all this shit, but it's like the belief is if you bullshit it long enough, it'll actually happen. Right? This is like the thing that they clutch to, and they believe that because like Donald Trump does that, right? Donald Trump's entire life has been nothing but basically like lying and testing the systems, pushing the boundaries of reality to see
what he can get away with. Yeah.
To see what he can get away with until it becomes real, right? Like you see there's a really incredible image that, at least to me, I think is newly released in the last few months of like the moment that Donald Trump is told that he won the presidency, and he like couldn't look more distressed, right? Because none of that he never actually wanted it to come true. He just wanted to troll and lie about it and get all like the money and benefit from it, but none of the responsibility. And I think like, you know, you see someone like Pepe Cash Millionaire who like knows quite well that he's bullshitting everyone, but he also very much believes in the dream. And even more so Peter, we call him Peter Lambo. He runs like a multi-level marketing company basically, where he just sells tchotchke bullshit on Instagram. And like, we had a longer interview with him in one of his cars where he's basically saying that like, you know, as old as America, like you fake it until you make it, that spending every available dollar he can on appearing to be rich will make him rich because it ingratiates himself with actually rich people. And that's where you find the opportunities. And he's not wrong. That's the thing. He's not wrong. But central to your point, it kind of only works in many ways most efficiently if you're like a white guy, right? Because those are the people that want to take you in to your system and like give you those opportunities. So it is deeply insidious, and you probably won't be surprised to learn that Peter regularly hosts very not COVID friendly parties and posts them on Instagram, and it really drives me crazy. No social distancing.
He's living his bunga bunga fantasy.
Living his bunga bunga fantasy.
I just want to say, I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to commend you guys on making like a really impressive documentary. Oh, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Showing up. I just want to commend you guys on making like a super impressive documentary, and I think you really grabbed kind of the zeitgeist in this in a way that I don't see a lot of other films making, like maybe like a handful of other movies. And I think just everything from like, I don't know, like the animations and just like the interviews and even like the editing, I felt like it was really, it all fit together like super well. It was just super impressive.
Oh,
good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask, we have to go, but I have one more question, and that's, I've heard you both say in interviews that one of the hardest challenges in making this movie was taking something as ugly and formless as a 4chan board, taking that and trying to give it sort of cinematic value, give it linearity. And I've also heard you say to Tim Heidecker that this was the #2 most torrented film on a certain site.
After Milan, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was on one site, but one very popular horrific site called Pass the Popcorn, where it's based in, I guess the guy who runs,
a different kind of horrific than 4chan.
Yeah, it's based in Denmark.
Financially horrific to us.
Yes. You have to send this motherfucker an Amazon gift card, and then he gives you your own username and password, and you log into it like you would log into Netflix, and there you are, like seeing every new available film that you watch now for free. And this guy makes all the money and like fucks over people like us who were like, yeah, Mulan was #1 opening weekend and we were #2 on his platform. And it's like, it's funny and it is a weird feather in our cap, but it's also like, fuck, man, like, and you know, you give people, what we're trying to do now is figure out like how to close the loop, because the few times that we posted about that and kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, told people that they could, you know, give us guilt payments on PayPal or send us Bitcoin, like people have actually. And if you give people the opportunity to do the right thing, they will. But
the guilt is weirder than that, because what happens is, first I'll say, like, I think if you're someone who's a teenager, and this is the movie about Pepe the Frog, we knew that it was going to get torrented. Like, it's obviously a film about virality and the internet. Like, we knew that the early adopters of the film would all totally watch it for free. And Giorgio and I have self-released the movie. We're the people that are releasing it. It's a two-man thing. The movie was made by us. It's released by us. And so, but, you know, there's this understandable sort of, you know, if you're a teenager, you just think anyone who made a movie is rich. You know, or you just think that like somehow that they have like made it, or that they have some sort of like, that they have the ability to maneuver in the entertainment world in some sort of like, you know, way. So we get these emails where people are like, why isn't this on Netflix? And you're an asshole for not putting on Netflix. This should be free. You guys are jerks. I'm going to steal it. It's like, well, Netflix didn't want it. Like, I mean, they saw it, they didn't want it for a variety of reasons. But, you know, there's also this thing that'll happen where they will send you a screen cap of them torrenting it, or being like, hey, I torrented it from this site, as sort of a just like kind of like trolly. I don't know, but it's not totally trolly, because sometimes they just want you to know that it's out there. I don't know. It's confusing, but people will reach out and tell you very specifically how they did not pay for your movie. And then we're just kind of left to just wonder why they engage with us at all.
And then we're PayPal. And then you have people, my favorite person though is the person who posts the film to YouTube, and then in the description links to their own PayPal.
Yes.
So like,
or Patreon.
It's like, hey, you know, help me out. I'm trying to give you guys great.
I'm a struggling artist giving you great content.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question then is, what would you suggest to artists who are trying to give form to that sort of shapelessness of the internet, but then who are also then ultimately going to have to face in post-production the internet?
I don't know if we have super cogent answers for that one, because it's like, certainly art and the internet, there is a little bit of a disconnect between content and art. You know, I mean, a lot of when I'll talk to like maybe like, you know, 13 or 14-year-olds about it or something, they'll be like, well, just put it on YouTube or something like that. And they would assume we'd get like ad dollars. There's not a real like sort of understanding of what it takes to pay for anything in the world, I think, if you're a younger person. It's just something to be aware of and try to navigate it the best you can, you know, because there is this thing that happens where it's like, you know, we premiered at Sundance, which was an amazing thing. And we even got an award at Sundance, which was like something that we could have never have predicted, which was fantastic. But, you know, there's this notion that all of a sudden like your career is going to be made, or that suddenly there's like a blank check, or that you as an artist are now going to have the ability to kind of like have choice within you know, the way you operate within this entertainment system. And that's just not true. You know, we had, you know, so you end up having to deal with like Amazon and Apple, where they didn't necessarily want to like buy your film or subsidize you for the film, but then you still have to pay them in order to self-release it. You know, if you rent it on Amazon, we have to still give half of that, you know, $2.99 or whatever to Amazon before we can sort of participate in that.
How can we share the film and pay you guys? Can you send it? Just tell your friends to rent it.
Yeah, just tell your friends to rent it. We're not trying to make we're not trying to make this an overly weird sob story, but
I am.
That's funny. We're role reversing here then right now. But yeah, just tell your friends to rent it. And also there's a lot of other good independent movies that have come out this year that are not on streaming. Seek them out.
Yeah, that's the thing I wanted to get to, the larger truth about the industry that like, I hope would become a story that the internet culture could support, is the awareness that as like the COVID has just destroyed theatrical releases. It's just destroyed theatrical, like small mom and pop theaters. And we'll see what happens when things reopen. But like theatrical releases are actually kind of the only way that truly independent films can break out as the streaming marketplace consolidates and monopolizes. And so the fear really is coming out of COVID is that if all of these small movie theaters that exist to specifically to curate these special films that otherwise wouldn't get seen, that basically we're at the behest of these fucking, it's literally, I'm not exaggerating, it's like, it's maybe a couple of dozen people in total who are making decisions, who all work at like 4 companies, who decide like what you're going to watch and what the value judgments their algorithm is making.
Right. Like, and the reality is we made a film that if you see like a Pepe, if you see a green Pepe JPEG pop up on Netflix, we're in an algorithmic gray area. You know, it's like that image has different kind of resonances for different kinds of people on the platform, and they don't know where to slot it into the algorithm. And it has some negative baggage, obviously. And so, I think it was just, they weren't sure how to figure out like where to place it within the platforms they've created.
But we're creating our own reality. Despite all the sad sack shit we're laying on you, it has been done like well. Like we're doing well. I can always do better, but I think like we're beating most people's expectations of what like 2 morons in an office in downtown Los Angeles could do on their own. And that's great. And so hopefully like those same cowardly lions at all these streamers will like be aware that, oh, we really missed the point of this whole film. And actually there's like really great things happening like this, where universities are hosting screenings around the country, and like people like Tim Heidecker to fucking Ira Glass are like hosting screenings for them. And like maybe our algorithms were wrong, and maybe we actually don't know what we're doing.
Well, So I guess, to piggyback on that, we are morons. These people are cowards. And not to be, but I mean, I guess pointing out like even like the Tim or Ira thing, that's just about like a community though. I think for any person who is coming out of sort of a collegiate situation or whatever, the main thing is you're going to ultimately be able to like navigate the world of film or art making through the community that you're able to like seek out and participate within. And so those were people that we didn't know well, but you know, we were able to just like be like, we made this thing, what do you think of it? And I think that, those relationships, big and small, have ultimately been what we've had to lean on to both get the film made and to get the film put out into the world. And, the people that know what it takes to get something made are the people that are also sort of willing to like champion it. And that's been a pretty fun process for, I never thought I was going to make a movie before. This is kind of a weird thing. Like, it's my first film. Like this has been like, maybe it's my only film. It's been kind of like, the best part of it has been meeting and talking to like other filmmakers and feeling though, as like I'm sort of part of like this new artistic community halfway through my art career. And that's been something that, even though we're not going to probably like make much money on Feels Good Man or any money on Feels Good Man, that has been sort of like an amazing experience in and of itself. And certainly also being able to be part of this conversation, that this larger cultural conversation we care about, has been gratifying in a lot of different ways. I'm really glad that we've been able to like have these kind of interactions during this pandemic, so that we're not sort of doom scrolling and sort of, it's been nice to have like this very worthy distraction during all of it. So that was extremely long-winded. Well, thank you all for not nodding off and falling asleep like on the Zoom. I'm assuming Simon, Ed, Mitch, you've all fallen asleep at this point. Emmanuel, you've fallen asleep. Madeline, you've always been asleep. Eden, asleep. The Blue Pearl, you're not a person. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for allowing for this worthy distraction to take place.
There we go.
Yes, thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you for the emoji hands.
Wait, how do you do emojis?
You don't know how to do the emoji hands, Liam?
Reactions.
No. Where's reactions?
Reactions.
Click react.
There's only 2 reactions, a thumbs up or a...
Yeah, Zoom gotta get it together with the reactions. There's only 2.
Oh, I have 5 reactions now. I didn't know they upgraded the reactions.
Really? I only have,
hey, Ben.
I only have 2.
I need to be on your server.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, the only reason the film's had a fighting chance is because like fans have shared it with other people. So
and because of Pepe, because people.
So share that film with your friends, man.
You guys worked really hard on it. We will.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh shit! All right, there we go. Thank you, Mitch. That's good. Yeah.
What is that?
Right on.
It's a club comic.
It's rare that's before the reprinting, right? So that's good. Yeah, those will actually go for a fair amount on eBay at this point. So
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we just launched our new web store.
Oh Jesus!
Blu-rays. Check it out. But no, honestly, thanks, especially because I'm sure a lot of you are probably headed home or something for Thanksgiving. So be safe.
Yeah, and if you have any grandparents or parents who are into QAnon, watch the movie with them.
Yeah.
It's a great way to sort of just have a larger discussion.
I started off by saying that the people that were most vocally disgusted and revolted by the film were #resist older women, but actually, conversely, some of our biggest boosters have been those same people once they see the film. So like there's this podcaster who does a film review podcast with his mom where they review films together, and it's really cute. But we talked to her and she was incredible. And she's like, I've just been telling all my Facebook friends every day, like, you got to watch this film. So it's fun. It's fun, guys.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you both again so much. It's an amazing film, and this was a wonderful talk. Thank you all. This is the first event of Bard Meme Lab. There's many great events coming down the pike for all meme heads out there.
What's like an example of another event that you're going to do?
Oh, we're trying
Manifesting E.
We're trying to get Insane Johnny. Do you guys know Insane Johnny?
Yeah.
Oh, and Zane Johnny from Wolf Eyes? Yeah. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I have to say that my favorite world of memes is the strange mix of like 90s noise music and memes. It is like, yeah.
I'm so glad he's back. The replacement was so awful. Like I was legit getting mad at how often I had to see just like a man with a cowboy hat and the caption was Michael Gira. Like they just became so unfunny.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Well, I also like all the degenerate versions of the ones that get rejected, like the whole world of it.
The whole world is
yeah.
And make sure to submit if you're a writer to content, a memetics research journal, to badmemelab@gmail.com. Or if you're a Bard student, just email me. You can just type Nick and you'll get my email. So, but thank you all so much and have a great night.
Absolutely.
And thank you again, Giorgio.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you guys.
Being you too.